Hey guys, my name's Crystal Kenny, and I'm in love with creating. All things artistic and imagination involved. I'm an American girl who chased her creative dreams all the way to Paris, France, making a living using photography. This podcast takes you inside the stories of all the artsy folks I've met along the way and gives you that extra push to discover your creative gifts. The desire to create is deeply inside each and every one of us, and I give you the tools and inspiration to find a new way of living a more creative life. This is La Vie Creative, the podcast. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back to Paris History, Avec, Hemingway. Today we are talking about Madame de Sévigné. I feel like I just completely said that wrong. Madame de Sévigné. It's kind of fun to say. Say it 5 times fast. Yeah. And Claudine is going to teach us all about another fascinating woman in French history. So I'll let her take it from here.
This one is actually one that people probably have heard her name before, or they've at least come across it. Madame de Sévigné, you were very close. She was born in 1626 in Paris, and where she was born is pretty awesome. She was the daughter of Céleste Beignet de Robin, who was the Baron de Chantal, and Madame de Coulon. She was born in the Palais Royal.
I mean, that's a pretty great place to be born.
Yes, in the Hotel Coulon, which was where it was her grandparents' home, but in the Palais Royal.
Fancy.
Which is awesome. Her father was killed when she was just a year old in the siege of La Rochelle in 1627, and her mother died when she was just 7 years old.
Oh, she was an orphan.
So she was an orphan. She was raised by her grandparents there in the Palais Royal. And eventually her uncle kind of helped take over when the grandparents got too old. They took over and he taught her Latin, Spanish, and Italian.
That's pretty cool, uncle.
Yeah. And so he basically is really, really involved in her education, which at that time, as we know in the past, I mean, she was born in 1626. Educating women and girls was not a priority.
No. Oh my goodness. And it's amazing he spoke all those languages.
Yeah. Because you had a choice then. You could be basically a nun or a wife.
Yeah. Go to the convent or make a baby.
Yeah. That's about it. But her other grandmother had founded a convent in France and was later canonized in 1767 by Clement the 13th.
Yikes.
And was recommended by Anne d'Autriche. Being canonized that's not a bad thing. That means she's a saint.
I was like, canonized? What are they doing to her?
Yes, so she became named a saint. In 1644 at 18, Madame de Sévigné, actually this is how she got her name. She was originally born Marie de Rabutin Chantal, but she married at 18 years old. She married Henri de Sévigné in the Église Saint Gervais, which is just that church just across from the Hotel de Ville.
And then
beautiful church.
It is a very pretty church. Did you do that on your tours yet?
We haven't gone into that one yet.
You need to do it.
It's on the list. But it's another one of those churches you won't find many people inside of. But they had 2 kids. They had Françoise in 1646 and Charles in 1648. And then their relationship changed. She no longer wanted to sleep with him. And so he was quite the man about town. And he was sleeping with many women, including Ninon, who we did a podcast episode about. And Ninon would also later count her son as another lover, too.
What?
Yeah. So she slept with the father and then later the son.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if we remember the Ninon story, she basically had a rule, I think it was 3 months. The relationships she would not sleep with any of them for more than 3 months, and the 3-month window they were pushed out. Like that was the end of their relationship.
Moving on to the son.
Yeah, next one. But his philandering led to his death when a duel with François Amenieu, who was set because of over a woman. And this was another one of his mistresses, Madame de Gundron, and he was killed in the duel.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah. So now at 25 years old, Madame de Sévigné was a widow. But at that time, it was kind of actually a stroke of luck for her because at the time, women, when they were married, there were so few things that they could do. But actually, widowed women actually had a little bit more freedom to do things. Even that's how the Madame Clicquot, when her husband died, the only reason she was able to take over the company was because she was a widow.
That is right. Yeah. So it was a good thing that her husband, who was sleeping around and not very nice.
Yeah. And it was killed in a duel.
No problem.
And duels, for us, all I could ever imagine is the duel scenes in old movies, where they walk 10 paces and turn around and shoot.
Yeah, I don't think they were using guns. Was it swords? How'd they kill each other?
I don't know. It was probably swords, or I don't know. Maybe they just wrestled.
Thumb wrestle.
Yeah, they were thumb wrestling. But it was a good kind of stroke of luck for her. When she had many suitors that wanted to be with her, but she decided to never remarry. She began to write letters, sending letters to her friends and family. And at the time, women couldn't even hold creative jobs. Like they couldn't be published under their name. They couldn't do, at that time, barely they could be even artists and painters because, it was just so, they couldn't learn, they couldn't go to ateliers. They couldn't do anything. So a lot of women at that time, even into the, 1920s, women had to publish under a man's name a lot of the time.
Even the 1920s. It's so amazing how far we've come in such a short time.
Yeah. I mean, that's only 100 years ago.
Yeah. That you weren't even allowed to publish under your name as a woman. Like that's insane.
Yeah. Like Zelda.
Yeah.
So, her daughter, Françoise, married in 1669 to the Comte de Grignon, which he was older. He'd been married twice and both of his wives died.
Bad luck.
And of course, we would look at that. Did they die mysteriously?
Well, I don't know if it was lucky for him for the women to die. It sounds like more winning for the man to die.
Yeah, I don't think so. But she, her mother was incredibly sad because they ended up moving down to Provence to live in the Chateau de Grignon, which was in his family. But prior to moving, they actually all lived together in Palais Royal. And they also lived in another even more awesome place coming up here. But in February 6, 1671, Madame de Sévigné sent her first letter to her daughter. And we know that because they were saved and they have it, the dated letter. She would send 3 to 4 letters a week down to her, and resulting well over 1,000 letters until she died.
1,000 letters. Wow. That was like texting back in the day.
Exactly. Could you imagine waiting for that reply?
Are you up?
I know there's no little bubble that shows they're typing. But this is basically how we know her, because she was a lady of letters, and her letters were, basically something that, people these weren't the way people wrote letters back then, or definitely not now. But her letters became basically, they were observation of her day, her life, and her friends. But she got to do some pretty cool things. And the way she wrote her letters were just, basically like writing a novel. Françoise would actually read them out loud. And once her mother realized that she was reading them out loud, she would write them, keeping that in mind, basically creating a performance piece with each letter.
That's so fun.
Yeah, isn't that awesome? She was a bit of a spitfire and hated monotony and boredom. So she would change the subject in it. Like if she was going on too long, she'd be like, well, enough about that. And then, go on to the next subject within the letter. It was pretty cool. But they became more and more popular. People actually would attend the reading of these letters. People would actually hand copy them and pass them around.
No way. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So he's basically writing plays.
Yeah. And so they documented the affairs of the time. She actually, this goes back to another podcast that we did. She actually attended the executions of the Marquise de Brinvilliers and Catherine Montfaucon, who were involved in the poison affair.
Interesting. It's all connected.
Yeah, it's all connected that we talked about with Madame de Montespan, who you went to Catherine Montfaucon and basically created that poison that she poisoned Louis the 14th with for like 15 years.
Like 15 years.
Yeah. So basically, like this whole thing, took over Paris at the time. It was like the huge thing that everybody was talking about. And these women were executed. So she was there. So she wrote about that in her letters. She was also at the trial for her friend, Nicolas Fouquet. And Nicolas Fouquet, of course, is the gentleman behind Vaux-le-Vicomte, the chateau, who was was working under Louis the 14th, and he built this beautiful, amazing chateau outside of Paris and had a big party and invited Louis the 14th. And Louis the 14th was so bothered with how, amazing it was. He figured Nicholas had to have been stealing from him. And so he had him arrested and thrown into jail. And then Louis the 14th took all of his artists, Charles Lebrun, Louis Laveau, and André Lenotre, who is basically, he took all these guys and started building Versailles.
Could you imagine if you just built this amazing castle and then you get thrown in jail for the rest of your life?
Yeah, you invite the boss over. And
That's so crap. Like, that stinks.
Yeah, but so she was there. She was friends with him. And so she was there at his trial. It's probably the only thing that we have that has the details of what happened at that trial. And then after he was in prison, because at that time too, it's like, you're going to trial, like you're not going to win. You're not going to get off. The Louis the 14th wants you, in prison. Yeah. It doesn't matter. This is a formality. So he gets carted off to prison, and she kept sending him letters. She was worried because they would get intercepted and sent to the king. And so she was worried that her little bit of her sassy tone would get her in trouble. But Louis the 14th was actually fascinated by them and asked her to come to visit him at Versailles.
Interesting.
Yeah, so she would come, and this was, before her daughter moved away, but she would go visit, go to Versailles, go to court, and bring her daughter there. She was often in attendance there, and she was heavily favored because they think that Louis probably had eyes on her daughter as well. Mm-hmm. Of course.
Yeah.
But on one occasion, they were actually ended up attending one of the biggest events in the history of Versailles. And I had never heard about this event until now. And it is called The Pleasures of the Enchanted Island.
What is that about?
I know. It was the first major event held there in the gardens from May 7th to the 13th in 1664. The party was dedicated to his mother, Anne d'Autriche, but really it was dedicated to his mistress, Louis de la Vallière.
I like that he involved his mother in
this
enchanted garden situation.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we're going to just say this is to my mom, but really...
An orgy in the garden.
Yeah, but the theme was Alcine and Roger, and it involved Molière and Lully, who was the superintendent of music for Louis the 14th.
Okay.
That's a job. Like, that's just crazy. Like, there was somebody that was just in charge of the music for him. In the story, Alcine was a seductress who bewitched the soldiers. Then she trapped him on her enchanted island. Roger was one of the soldiers who was jailed and then became her lover. Molière was only given a few weeks to actually put this all together from the time they announced they were going to do this. So he worked with Lully, and poet Philippe Quignon and André Lenotre, the garden designer, to design the play to basically impress the king and the court.
No pressure.
Yeah, impress him, and on the on the Enchanted Island. Louis XIV actually took part in the play. He played the role of Roger, and he was dressed in this red velvet costume, and he rode in on a horse that was covered with golden reins and jewels.
He's a drag queen, basically.
Yeah, basically. He was followed by a parade of soldiers, and they went to the Bassin d'Apollyon, and a golden chariot of Apollo that was 24 feet long followed them.
What?
Yeah.
This is so extra.
And you could just imagine, I mean, I could picture the whole thing in my mind because you just know who Louis XIV was and what Versailles looks like. It's so easily like, okay, yeah, I could totally see that happening.
That's normal.
That's normal. It went on for 7 days. On the seventh day, was a premiere of Moliere's Tartuffe, which is one of his most famous plays. Everybody in Paris wanted to be there. And of course, Madame de Sévigné was there for the first night to see it and wrote about it in her letters.
So that's how we know about it.
That's how we know. But at the time, she became very popular in Paris society. She attended many of the salons, including Ninon's salon, who, of course, had slept with her husband and her son. Yeah, she met Madame de Lafayette at one of the salons, and they became very close friends. Madame Lafayette was also a writer, and she published a pamphlet called The Princess of Cleves, and she actually had to write that under basically a nom de plume as well, a different name. Mm-hmm. Lafayette's stepfather was actually the uncle of Madame de Sévigné's husband.
It's all related.
Yeah, it's all related. But in 1677, she moved into the Hotel de l'Inray, which is now the Carnavalet.
Ah, the Carnavalet.
Yes, now it is the Musée Carnavalet, and I'm so incredibly excited that after 4 long years, it is just now reopened in Paris. It's the oldest museum in Paris, and it is free to go and visit. And so I cannot wait to go probably the day that my plane lands.
I didn't know it was the oldest in Paris.
Yeah, and so she actually lived there until her death. The street outside of it is named after her.
I had no idea. It is a really cool museum. I didn't know it'd been closed so long.
Yeah, it was supposed to reopen last year, but then with COVID, it closed in 2016. I remember going and seeing it. Actually, I think it's just like a week or two before it closed. And at that point, 2/3 of it was already closed off. So what I did see wasn't very much. So I am really excited. It's the history of Paris is in that museum, and you could go and see, there's old signs from businesses, and there's just like whole rooms that they basically had taken and rebuilt there. A lot of her own things are there. There's a painting of her, and there is some of her furniture there as well.
I like the Art Nouveau section. They put like the metro and all the cool stuff in that room.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's basically 2 different hotel particuliers that they pushed together to become the Musée Carnavalet, and she lived in one of those. She
died there.
She died there. She spent the final decade of her life there, but she also traveled between Brittany, where she had a place there because of that had been in her husband's family, in Paris, of course, and then down in Grignon, which is the chateau where her daughter was. She died on April 17th, 1696, at 70 years old, possibly of pneumonia.
Well, she lived a very long time for a woman.
Yeah, she definitely lived. She is buried down in Grignon at the church there that's near the chateau. After her death, her granddaughter actually had all these letters and decided to publish them. It was printed in 3 different editions because there was something wrong with each edition, and they just had to reprint them again. Pauline, her granddaughter, also with the help of Françoise in her later years, they worked to publish, and that was just for 28 of the letters.
There's so many of them.
Yeah, so there was only 28. The editors, the editions were printed so badly they had to keep trying to redo them. During that time, Pauline found a new publisher that would actually edit the letters, removing pieces that they thought were too scandalous for the time, and then they destroyed the originals.
What? That's crap.
Which is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
A newer edition in 1734 was printed, and that included 600 of her letters.
Wow.
And this time they were all put in there in chronological order, something that the first editions did not do. After the printing, Pauline had, destroyed the originals. But after her death in 1737, more letters were published. Again, in 1754, 722 of them. That was the majority of the letters that remained that she had written to her daughter.
Have you read them?
I actually was able, you could find it on Kindle and download it. It's better to have it in the French version. But you could easily find it. And it was on Kindle for a few dollars, like $2 or something. But I'll put a link to it, what I found on my website. In 1873, a professor was in Dijon in a small little antique shop and found 320 more of the letters.
What?
That she had written to her daughter. These were most likely copies that people just hand copied, to pass around. And so some of the original letters were then discovered with the parts that the editors at first had taken out.
So he must be rich now.
Yeah, well, they weren't published until 1953.
What?
Yeah, today, 1,100 letters are actually published. Many of which, of course, capture the time that was, basically of her life and different things that she had seen. And a lot of those originals were destroyed, but thankfully to that gentleman that found them in the shop, they're saved. You can actually see some of the original letters at the Carnavalet.
That's cool. I don't think I would have known what they were, but now I'll look for them.
Now you'll look for them. There's the painting I mentioned earlier is by Claude Defebvre. She's dressed in her mourning clothes. And then, of course, there's a few pieces of her furniture as well as her letters. You can see some of the letters.
I can't wait to go visit.
I know, I'm dying. I can't wait. I've seen pictures of the inside. It had opened on May 29th. It is free, but if you're going to be in Paris this summer, for pretty much everything you want to go see in a museum, I would highly recommend going online and making sure you have a ticket. Even though it's a free museum, you are most likely through the summer going to need to have tickets just so they could control the amount of people coming in.
Yeah, exactly, because it might be crazy.
Yes. Can't wait to see it. Dying.
Well, it won't be long now. You'll be here.
Yep. It's very soon.
Well, thank you so much, Claudine, for all that fascinating history. And now you guys can follow along the footsteps of these women in these museums, in these houses. It's kind of fun to revisit history. It's much more interesting when you actually know what you're looking at. So thanks to Claudine for that. And don't forget to join her virtual tours every Sunday. She goes live on Zoom, tells you the history as we walk live around Paris with you. You can ask questions. And please go over to her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.
Yeah.
Thank you much.
We'll see you later. Thank you for listening to Paris History Avec a Hemingway. If you want to find out some more, you could always find me on my Instagram page, Claudine Bleu Blanc Rouge, and that's BLEU, as in the French way to spell it. And each day I post a daily history lesson about a person or a place or something in Paris, or it's lots of fun facts. And then also at ClaudineHemingway.com, where you can also sign up for my newsletter there.